To understand power, we must first understand the collapse of identity. Joseph was a young man defined entirely by his father's favor, a boy wearing a coat that did not just represent status, but a deep, dangerous isolation from his peers. We often view his betrayal as a tragedy, but from a psychological perspective, it was a necessary destruction. Without the pit, there would be no throne. The favored son had to die so the strategic leader could be born. But how does a person survive the total erasure of their world without becoming consumed by bitterness? Today, we examine the story of Joseph not as a sermon, but as a masterclass in the architecture of resilience. In the beginning, Joseph was a figure of profound naivety. He possessed a coat of many colors, a garment that physically distinguished him from the brothers who worked the fields. This was not just a fashion choice. In psychological terms, it was a barrier, a constant reminder to his siblings that they were secondary. Joseph further fueled this resentment by sharing dreams of grandeur where his family bowed down to him. He lacked the social intelligence to realize that his special status was a target. His father's overprotection had left him psychologically soft, unaware of the brewing shadow in those closest to him. Resentment is a slow-burning fuel. It builds in the silence of the overlooked, and for Joseph's brothers, that fuel was about to ignite. They did not just want to hurt him, they wanted to erase the symbol of their own perceived inadequacy. And yet, we must ask, was Joseph's arrogance a character flaw, or simply the natural result of an environment that never challenged him? The answer matters because it sets the stage for the most brutal lesson a human can learn. The lesson that your identity is fragile and can be stripped away in an instant. When Joseph was thrown into the pit, he did not just lose his coat, he lost his reality. Imagine the psychological shock of being betrayed by your own blood. These were the men who were supposed to be his protectors, yet they became his captors. In an instant, Joseph was transformed from a favored son into a commodity, a piece of property to be sold. This is the dark night of the soul, a state where everything you believed about the world is proven false. Most people break here. They become permanent victims, defining the rest of their lives by the injustice they suffered. But what makes some individuals different? Why did Joseph not succumb to despair? The answer lies in the radical shift of his perspective. In the silence of that pit, the boy who dreamed of being served had to face the reality of being a slave. It was a total ego death. He could no longer rely on his father's name or his special coat. He was alone in a foreign land, stripped of his language, his status, and his rights. This was the forge before he could rule a nation. He had to learn to rule the only thing he had left, his own mind. Joseph was sold to Potiphar, an Egyptian officer. At this point, Joseph could have chosen the path of quiet rebellion or lethargy. Instead, he did something remarkable. He became the perfect administrator. He applied himself to the mundane details of a household with the same intensity he would later apply to an empire. This is a crucial psychological principle. Competence is a form of power that transcends status. By mastering the small things, Joseph made himself indispensable. He realized that while he could not control his freedom, he could control his standard of work. Potiphar eventually trusted Joseph with everything he owned. Why? Because Joseph had developed a reputation for absolute reliability, a trait born from the discipline of the unwanted. He was not working for Potiphar, he was working for his own self-respect. This period represents the transition from a child who is given power to a man who earns it through sweat and organization. But even this new stability was a test. It raises a difficult question. Can a man maintain his integrity when he is once again faced with a corrupting influence? The answer would determine if he stayed a servant or became something much greater. Joseph's ascent was interrupted by a new trial, the advances of Potiphar's wife. To a man who had lost everything, the offer of intimacy and favor must have been incredibly tempting. But Joseph refused. His refusal wasn't just about morality. It was about psychological autonomy. He understood that a moment of impulse would destroy years of strategic building. He chose his long-term vision over short-term gratification, and his reward for this integrity. He was falsely accused and thrown into prison. This is where most people finally collapse. To do the right thing and be punished for it is a special kind of agony. It feels like a betrayal by the universe itself. But look at Joseph's reaction. He didn't protest. He didn't spiral into bitterness. He accepted the prison as he had accepted the pit. In the darkness of the Egyptian dungeon, he once again began to organize. He became the leader of the prisoners. He realized that the environment doesn't dictate the man dictates the environment. If he could manage a household, he could manage a prison. He was refining his ability to see structure in chaos, but was this enough? Could a prisoner ever hope to influence the fate of a kingdom? In prison, Joseph developed a new skill, the interpretation of patterns symbolized as dreams. He listened to the cupbearer and the baker, analyzing their subconscious fears and hopes. He was learning to read the human psyche. When he correctly predicted their fates, he asked the cupbearer to remember him. But the cupbearer forgot. For 2 more years, Joseph sat in that cell, forgotten. This is perhaps the hardest part of his journey. It is not the pain, but the silence. 2 years of waiting for a promise that does not come. This is where strategic patience is forged. Joseph did not waste those years. He studied. He watched the guards, the prisoners, and the flow of information. He was becoming an architect of systems. He realized that power is not just about being in charge. It is about understanding how things work. So, when Pharaoh finally had a dream that no one could explain, Joseph was ready. He did not emerge from prison as a broken man. He emerged as a finished product. He was no longer the boy in the coat. He was a man who understood the cycles of the world, the years of plenty and the years of famine. But the ultimate test was still to come. Joseph became the second most powerful man in Egypt. He saved the nation and the known world from starvation. But then, the past returned. His brothers, the very men who had tried to kill him, came to Egypt seeking food. They did not recognize him. At this moment, Joseph held absolute power over their lives. He could have executed them, enslaved them, or watched them starve. This is the ultimate test of character. Does a man use his power to settle old scores or to build a future? Joseph chose a complex psychological game. He tested them to see if they had changed, and when he saw their remorse, he wept. He did not forgive them because he was weak. He forgave them because he was so strong that their past betrayal no longer had power over him. He realized that his suffering had a purpose. It had placed him in a position to save his family. This is the integration of the shadow. He acknowledged the evil they did, but he refused to let it dictate his actions. He told them, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good." This is the hallmark of a truly powerful mind. It is the ability to take the worst things that have happened to you and weave them into a narrative of victory. But what does this mean for us today? The story of Joseph is a blueprint for the modern individual. It teaches us that betrayal and isolation are not the end of the story unless we choose to let them be. Joseph's power didn't come from his title, it came from the fact that he could not be broken. He used the pit to find his core, the slave market to learn service, the prison to find patience, and the throne to practice mercy. If you feel overlooked, rejected, or stuck, remember that your current prison might be the very place where you are developing the skills for your future throne. Resilience is not about bouncing back to who you were, it's about becoming someone entirely new through the pressure of your circumstances. Discipline, emotional control, and a long-term vision are the tools of transformation. Joseph's journey reminds us that the code of favor is a gift, but the character built in the dark is a conquest. The question is, will you let your betrayal define your failure, or will you let it be the foundation of your power? Thank you for joining us for this psychological deep dive. Joseph's story is a testament to the human spirit's ability to turn shadow into light. If this analysis gave you a new perspective on your own challenges, consider subscribing to the channel. We explore the timeless archetypes that shape our modern world, helping you find clarity in the chaos. Until next time, stay disciplined, stay visionary, and keep building. See you in the next video.